Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. Very high above all the puerile and vapid forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone, and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. Hope everybody had a good Columbus Day. Note, it was not Indigenous Peoples Day. No, that's not a thing. It never has been. So the Biden administration for the last couple of years has issued a royal decree from on high that we're to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. It takes Congress to do that. And there are a lot of good reasons why it's not Indigenous Peoples Day, nor has it ever been, because Congress passed a law to recognize Columbus and his contributions to, quote unquote, finding the new world. And there was a lot of stuff that was it's just not true that you probably learned in school. And so on yesterday's broadcast, that's why I replayed the Columbus Day special. So I hope you had a good day off. Of course, it was a federal holiday. No, we don't take that many breaks on Cowboy State Politics, but the Columbus Day, I thought it was important to replay the old Columbus Day episode. So that's what we did. Couple of program notes before we really get going on today's program. On tomorrow's show, well, I guess, I should say we have an announcement to make. And for the first time, as far as I can tell, a fully internet powered radio show is going to have live call-ins. And we're going to do that we're going to start tomorrow on Cowboy State Politics Live. We'll probably do it at the bottom of the hour. And the whole idea is just to give it a dry run, see if we can get some people to call in, and make sure that we've got all the bugs worked out of it. And then on Friday, we will start Open Line Friday. Of course, in homage to the great Maharishi, Rush Limbaugh, every week on Friday. Feature calls. Pretty much not exactly all 3 hours of his program, but a good majority of it. So on Friday's edition of the Cowboy State Politics, it will be the inaugural Open Line Friday. So I'm really excited about this. I've been trying to figure out a way to do this for a really long time. And so, we're going to start it tomorrow, just to get some kinks worked out of it. And then on Friday, we're going to take live calls, probably for the majority of the broadcast. And we'll do it just like Rushy did. That you can call in about any issue that you want to, and we'll take about it. And then during the rest of the week, whenever I get bored or whenever we have some time, we'll probably start up the phone lines. And if you want to call in and be part of the broadcast, we'll go ahead and do that. It's going to work the exact same way as every other radio show. I've already purchased a studio phone number. Of course, all of this is voice over IP, but you can call in from your cellular phone, or if you still have a landline, you can call me from a landline. So anyway, we're going to start that tomorrow. Super excited. Make sure you don't miss the broadcast. On today's show, um, we've got, and if you're watching on the Ditto Cam, we've got a number of things. PMS NBC is finally admitting that women actually love Trump. There's been this narrative for a really long time that women, well, they just hate Trump. And all of this originated as if it never had to have origin because they're Democrats, we're Republicans. They just assume that women hate Republicans, which is not true at all. And there's a simple reason for that. Usually, in just about every household, it is mom that runs the books and runs the household. And so, by that very nature, you have to be conservative. And when an election comes down to your pocketbook, well, guess who's going to be voting for the conservative? So, anyway, MSNBC is admitting that. JD Vance, man, he has been pounding the media every chance he gets. I've got some great sound bites for you today. He's just calling out the liberal narrative every chance he gets, and that's, as conservatives, that's what we have to do. If you allow the media to use their narrative, that's what the story is going to be, and you have to push back on them. That's why I started Cowboy State Politics in the very beginning, is to push back against some of this media garbage in Wyoming, to give them some opposition, to say, no, your stupid story that you're peddling isn't true. Here's why. And by the way, all the politicians that you like, they're a bunch of redcoats anyway. So anyway, JD Vance has taken up that mantle. And then I've got to cover this story. I can't resist. One of my favorite stores, True Value. A lot of Ace Hardwares are True Value. True Value is filing for bankruptcy, and that's really a big bummer. That and more on today's broadcast. But first, let's get a word in from one of our sponsors, freedomgoldusa.com. If you've been thinking about buying gold or silver, it's actually not that bad of an idea, in my opinion. The economy is a wreck. Nothing is certain. Yesterday, Dow hit 46,000, 43,000, whatever it was, for the first time in history. But that's not exactly a good sign. It's a reflection of inflation. And of course, inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. And when you have a volatile economy, you protect yourself. And one way that you can do that is with gold and silver. But here's the thing about Freedom Gold USA. They don't charge ridiculous fees like other major gold companies. You hear about a lot of them on the other big popular radio shows. Just about every conservative host has a gold sponsor. But the reality is, if you've been buying from them, you're probably getting ripped off. Because in many cases, they charge 30% or 50% over and above the market price for gold in order to make a profit. It's a lot of money to pay big sponsors, and Freedom Gold USA doesn't do that. They pay me, which is awesome. But for a free consultation, just to examine where your finances are, find out if gold or precious metals are right for you, go to freedomgoldusa.com/David. All right, so let's get to the news. MSNBC has finally decided that they can admit that women actually like Trump. And the shocking thing about this is on PMS NBC, they actually admit. And I quote, this comes from Breitbart. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitali beat down Republican nominee Donald Trump's new lead among white women against Vice President Kamala Harris that he has gained in the span of just a few weeks during a Monday segment. An NBC News poll found that Harris An NBC News poll found Harris holding a 6-point advantage against Trump among white women, 51% to 45, in September. But the former president has since gained ground and took the lead in October. So in the span of just a couple of months, Trump has overtaken Kamala Harris in his support of women. Fascinating. Trump is currently leading Harris among the demographic by 2 points. a slightly smaller lead than the one he had against President Joe Biden in the 2020 election. And if you watch all of these polls, they pretty much mirror what happened in 2016. In the 2016 election, all of the polls had Hillary Clinton leading pretty much the entire way until election day, when the entire apple cart was upset, and we found out that all the pollsters were wrong. And if you watch the trends, that's exactly what's happening this time around. And by watching the trends, I mean what really happened in the election, not what the talking heads were saying. Quote, among white women in that poll, Trump was, of course, trailing Harris. Of course, trailing Harris. The PMSNBC for you. But Harris had a nice, healthy +6 margin among these voters. And you see what a month can do. A month can be an eternity in politics, and it can also mean pretty big changes on polls, like this one, when again, you see white women just over the course of a few weeks shift into the Trump column, where he has put up a +2 majority with them. And again, just because this is a completely unseen, completely unintentional, random act of journalism, play it.
Very moment that Vice President Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee, I had Democratic operatives telling me, we know we have work to do with white women. Certainly that's why we see Harris in places like Erie, Pennsylvania. But from the ground to a little bit of the data here, because I'll take you back to 2020, when, of course, President Biden won among all women in the state of Pennsylvania. But the story gets a little bit deeper when you see that Trump actually did better with white women than Biden did, again, in 2020 and in Pennsylvania. But then you bring that into our new polling that we saw just over the weekend. Yeah, and you see what they're doing. Can be a journey. It can also mean pretty big changes on things like this. Because again, you see white women just over the course of a few weeks shift into the Trump column, where there you have to majority with them. That brings us to the line where we actually pass, especially on the weekend. Where if you love in 2016 at 56% for white women, then he gained a few points in 2020 to 55%, and then for open question.
Okay, all right. I've had enough of Ali Vitali. The point here is that the media is finally deciding that at some points they have to tell you the truth, that their narrative is no longer working. Now, this whole women hatred of Trump thing, it probably started before the TMZ, the locker room soundbite that was supposed to be the campaign ending exclusive that happened during the 2016 election. But as we found out, that women really didn't weren't voting for a nice guy. They were voting for a guy that was this person for the job. And the truth is, liberals, the MSNBC, the liberal media, they constantly treat constituent groups like they're stupid. Like the only reason that you would vote for Trump is if he's a raging liberal. I mean, that's the narrative that PMS, NBC, CNN, NBC, ABC, all of them try to peddle. That's just not true. Generally speaking, voters are pretty cognizant when it comes to elections. Now, when it's a close election, when there's a question, then you'll see the electorate move to either side. It's kind of a toss up. This is not one of those elections. We're seeing polls in Pennsylvania where Trump is pretty much. I mean, all signs are pointing to him winning that election, barring any massive cheating, of course. Which I think that as conservatives, as Republicans, we should be. I hope the RNC is really on their game watching all this cheating. I hope that they've learned from the mistakes of 2020 and they've got everything in place for this election. Because if there's one thing you can be certain about Democrats, it's that they will cheat. You give them an opportunity, they'll take everything. It's because, I say this all the time on the program, but liberals and Democrats, they have an entirely different worldview than you and I do. They don't, whatever it takes to win is where they're at. And it's because they believe the ends justify the means. But at some point, they have to try to gain some of their legitimacy back, which is why you're seeing this report from PMS NBC. The support or trust in the media is at an all-time low. In fact, the media is less popular than Congress, if you can believe all of that. But it's amazing. And to have some relevance in the future or at any time past the election, the media has to be able to look back at their coverage of the election and say, see, we told you what was happening. We actually reported the truth. And so don't think that this is just a random act of journalism. I mean, here's the way. What it is, it's the media trying to put forth a narrative that is actually correct. And so that way, after Trump wins and after the election, you can look back on their reporting and say, well, see, we were reporting the truth. You can trust us. And then they'll be able to shift their narrative back to liberalism, back to Marxism. And the hope is that you will believe during the election. They told you the truth at a couple of different points. You see, it's all a setup. And the media, um, we bash on them all that you want, but they really are playing a chess game. And it's all a setup because they can see the writing on the wall just like everybody else can, and so there's no reason to assume that they wouldn't. And by and large, the media, they have to have some sort of credibility. I mean, that's how they stay in business. That's what they're attempting to do. That's the narrative they're peddling. That's what they're trying to do. Coming up after the break, we're going to get to all the great J.D. Vance sound bites. So he's pounding the media. It's all deserved. You can listen to Cowboy Politics a lot every Monday, Friday, and independence. Make sure that you subscribe and follow Cowboy Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboypolitics.com, or anywhere that you can get your podcast. Make sure that you don't miss this episode of Cowboy Politics. Cowboy Politics is sponsored by Greenville USA.com. They put in see stock market, which is not controlled and different your income. Some way you show up every day and live on that thing. So USA.com interview to discuss your options again. So this is right for you. One more time, then you go to USA.com/date. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Wyoming's most listened to podcast. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Far better than anybody else in the Wyoming media, or any other media, by the way. And, it's fitting that we started out the program talking about a random act of journalism on behalf of CMSNBC. Because when you compare it to the power of Cowboy State Politics, well, frankly, there is no comparison. And really, they shouldn't even try because they can't produce. Before the break, I told you that J.D. Vance has been pounding the media and putting them in their rightful place, which is no more than just partisan hacks. That all of them are just rabid partisans, and it's really nobody care about. They don't really care about reporting the news, and they don't. It's refreshing. It's awesome to see J.D. Vance giving them some pushback. Giving them their just desserts. So here we go. JD Vance is beating the masses from the Federalist, which means they'll soon try taking him out for good. And I quote, in pretty much every national news interview with JD Vance within the past 2 weeks, Donald Trump's running mate has revealed himself to be nothing short of a stud. He did it at the debate, fully fact checking the two names Justin tomorrow. He did it in an interview Saturday with the New York Times, providing to be unflappable in the face of a series of questions that were all some variation of, why are you so terrible? He did it in an appearance Sunday on ABC News' This Week, thoroughly humbling Martha Raddatz and forever searing into our minds the properly belittling phrase, Martha, do you hear yourself? That one, it is going to have to go in the Cowboy state politics archives just so we can, accuse other people of being Martha. So I've got a couple sound bites lined up for you. Just a refresher, here is that fact check response at the debate. Since you're French, I think it's important to say what's absolutely, absolutely amazing. It's all been spectacular to witness. And if nothing else, Republicans other than Trump are getting a live masterclass in navigating the dishonest dorks in the media. And it's free. No consultants are necessary. You don't have to pay for entertainment like this. JD Vance is giving it to you for free, which is exactly what Republicans ought to be doing. I did a story a couple days ago on the podcast, interviewed Representative Pepper Ottman, and while I disagree with their decision not to participate in the debate that was put on by the Democrats and the League of Women Voters, and absolutely she has a point in that the Democrats don't have any business participating in a Republican primary. It's totally reasonable. The reason I disagreed with their decision not to participate is I would have just beat him about the head and shoulders the entire time. When the question came out, hey, David, why are you such a crappy politician or crappy candidate? I would have said, why are you a Democrat participating in a Republican primary? And I would have just continued pounding on them. Well, it's great to see and hear, frankly, somebody on the national stage, except for Trump, other than Trump, bashing on the media and just putting them in their rightful place, that they are partisan hacks. Now, before that soundbite, I mentioned that there was a Martha Raddatz soundbite. But before then, and this one really hasn't been all that widely reported, there's did an interview with Lulu from the New York Times. You know what Lulu's last name is. It's probably as dumb as her first name. But this one, in this soundbite, they're talking about illegal immigrants and construction. And there's this claim made by the New York Times. Well, it's undocumented immigrants, that illegal aliens that do most of our construction, which of course is ridiculous. The only reason why there's a large percentage of undocumented immigrants or illegal aliens in the construction business is they can be paid, they're paid under the table. It's not legal. But of course, if you're building a house and you can pay somebody under the table, and it's a heck of a lot less than paying somebody else, if you're if you don't have any scruples, if you don't care about what you're actually supposed to be doing, actually American jobs, then yeah, you're going to employ an illegal alien. But he totally schools the New York Times. Now, this soundbite's a little bit long, but it's totally worth listening to. Here we go. Check this out.
Well, I know you do. I don't think that any this you, but about a third of the construction work.
Okay, so she does this a couple times during the soundbite. Well, not a lot of people agree with you, and it's continually the opinion of a liberal activist who is masquerading as a journalist. Several times during this soundbite, she gives her opinion into the discussion. Instead of just letting JD Vance, make his point and then countering, she has to interrupt and try to, debunk or whatever you want to call it, what he's saying right at the moment. And it's absolutely irritating. Anyway, let's continue.
So how do you propose to build housing necessary that we need in this country? By all the people needing construction.
It's a fair question. Back in 1960. Consumption that because a large number of people now labor, but that's the only way to impose. I think again,
The country is much bigger. The need is much bigger. I mean, I'm not arguing.
The country is not that much bigger. If you look at population levels, for the past 20 years, past 30 years, the population of the country is really not all that much bigger when you discount all of the illegal aliens that have entered the country. And JD Vance makes that point. Because you have 25 million people here that aren't supposed to be in the country, they're not here legally. But really, the population has remained fairly on even keel the past number of years. Of course, people move around, they move from place to place, but that doesn't change the overall population number. And the reality is, it's not that much bigger than it was even back in late 1990s or early 2000s. And that's the point that JD Vance is making.
I'm asking how you would deal with the knock-on effect of your proposal to remove millions of people who work in a critical part of the economy.
well, I think that what we would do is we would take, let's say, for example, 7 million age men, small number of women, but still millions of age who drop out time, of course. You absolutely re-engage those into the American labor market. This is any
To work in construction.
To work in construction? Of course. And JD Vance's point is if there are jobs available, people will work. I mean, if you're hungry and you can't rely on the government, well, yeah, people will go to work. And yes, even women in construction. This is absolutely the leftist, game here. Oh no, Americans won't do those jobs, and they shouldn't have to. That's bullcrap, my friends. When you look at the unemployment rate, which is, they're about to talk about this, the unemployment rate is 4.1%. Well, that doesn't include everybody who's not looking for a job, everybody who's relying on the government to make their living, everybody who is, since COVID, has decided to stay home and sit on the couch. The number doesn't include those. But I guarantee you, my friends, if people get hungry enough and if they have no other option, they will absolutely do what they ought to have been doing, go back to work. And yes, if there are good jobs, if there are living wage jobs in construction, you can fill them.
The employment rate is 4.1%. Most people who don't work can't work in the regular economy. They're in the military, they're parents, they're sick, they're old. They might not want to work in construction.
The unemployment rate does not count labor force participation profits. Again, this is one of the really deranged things that I think illegal immigration does to our society is it gets us in a mindset of saying we can only build a house for children. I have 7 million. This meant not even just men who has completely dropped out of the labor force. People say, well, Americans don't do those jobs. Americans don't do those jobs for below the table wages. They won't do those jobs for non-living wage. But people will do those jobs. They will just do those jobs at certain wages. Think about this from the perspective of the American. Okay. I want them to go searching in their own country, with their own citizens. Sometimes people who maybe struggle with addiction or trauma get them re-engaged in American society. We cannot have an entire American business community that is giving up on American workers and then importing billions of illegal labor. That is what we have thanks to Cowboy policies. I think it's one of the biggest drivers for equality. It's one of the biggest reasons why we have a billion people dropped out of labor force. Why try to re-engage an American citizen in a good job You support somebody from Central America who's going to work under the table for poverty wages. It is a disgrace and has led to the evisceration of the American middle class.
Did you notice that she stopped talking when she realized that she had been beaten? And that's what you have to do with the media. If you're running for office and you're doing an interview with, and let's just say like any media, what is probably going to be a wacko liberal because most of them are. Most Wyoming newspapers are decidedly liberal. Occasionally you'll get a conservative journalist, but for the most part, they're a bunch of liberal wackos. Definitely at the Turkey Vulture, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, or the Pravda on the Platte, the Casper Star Tribune, or, I've been covering the Cowboy for a long time. Those people are way left wackos masquerading as conservatives. But, if you beat them at a solid point, they will have to shut up because they know that there's no possibility of getting out of it. And that's what you heard in that New York Times soundbite. Before we go to the break, let's go ahead and play that Martha Raddatz piece. That I know you probably heard it on the over the weekend, but it's absolutely incredible. Listen to this.
Incidents were limited to a handful. This conflicts are apartment complexes. The mayor said our dedicated police officers had acted on those.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem, and not Kamala Harris from Florida. Find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else.
Martha, do you hear yourself? Absolutely incredible. Holding the media accountable, giving back as good as much as they give you, pounding them. And that's what you have to do, my friends. The people in the media, you don't have to take their narrative of whatever they're dishing out to you. Don't take it. Don't ever accept the premise. Don't respond to the question on their level. When I'm debating someone, and there's a reason why I do a lot of interviews. I wouldn't. But I constantly say, I address the question behind the question. Your premise is flawed. Let me explain why, and then proving them wrong. That's what you have to do with the liberal media. And thank God for J.D. Vance. When we come back from the break, we have a really disturbing story that I told you about, that one of my favorite stores is filing for bankruptcy. So we'll do that after the break. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. And it's you got to tell you, my friends, I'm loving where the program is going. Right after the break, again on what's going to happen tomorrow on the broadcast. So stay tuned. Thank you for listening. We'll be back after this. While you're tromping around in the boonies, at some point it's going to snow a lot. And you definitely want to make sure that you keep your feet nice and interesting. The best way to do that is a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the warmest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of their weather for our great state, and it comes with absolute state agent that you can trust. And she lived with Jackson for almost 4 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market.
Last year, she sold almost $5 million worth of property. So they can just buy, sell, and for back up the phone. Her phone number is 307-699, 519.
Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics, live on the Independence Network, on Facebook Live, on Twitter, on YouTube, almost omnipresent. My friends, I absolutely love where the program is going, and I've been telling you, I've been trying to prep you for tomorrow and Friday. On tomorrow's broadcast, for the first time, as far as I can tell, first time a purely internet radio show is going to have live call-ins. I know that you hear different broadcasts, Sirius Radio, all of those, and you hear live callers. It's all pre-recorded, as far as I can tell. I haven't seen any evidence that any of it is live. The Cow Pie Morning Show, they have their Zoom room where you can do it online. But this is going to be something different. You can actually call into the broadcast, and you can just do it right from your cell phone or from your landline or whatever. And here's the plan. So we are going to at the bottom of the hour tomorrow, we're going to turn on the phones. And I'm going to give you the phone number right now because I don't want you trying and calling in and trying to test it. Don't worry, I'll have it up and working when it's time to let it fly. And I think probably at the bottom of the hour tomorrow, we'll go ahead and do that. It's going to be, I'm super excited about it. So again, make sure that you're watching tomorrow's broadcast or listening to tomorrow's broadcast, however you do that. If it's either on the Independence Network or if it's on one of the Facebook feeds or Twitter or whatever, we're going to have live call-ins tomorrow at the bottom of the hour. So anyway, make sure that you don't miss it. And yeah, super excited about it. So as I mentioned before the break, True Value, and at the beginning of the broadcast, actually, True Value has filed for bankruptcy after 75 years. It blames a weak housing market for plunging sales. The True Value is one of those iconic American brands, been around for a really long time, and just about every single community has a True Value. They're here in Sheridan. Actually, I think we have two of them. There's an Ace Hardware, and for some of the same brands. And then there's a True Value building store that's also here. But I mean, if you're that's going to do your own work on your house or your property, generally speaking, that's probably where you go. If you don't have a Home Depot, you're going to go to True Value. Let's hear from the New York Post, and I quote, True Value filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on Monday and is seeking to sell the 75-year-old business to a rival, the latest hardware company to succumb to a weak housing market, the company said. The Chicago-based company said it would continue day-to-day operations at its 4,500 independently owned retailers throughout the Chapter 11 bankruptcy process. Hardware and lumber wholesale Do It Best is the sticking bidding horse bidder and has agreed to pay $153 million in cash for the sinking company. After a thorough evaluation of strategic alternatives, we determined that our sale of our business was the path forward to maximize value and best serve our retail partners and other stakeholders into the future, True Value CEO Chris Kempa said in a statement. As the housing market stalled because of high mortgage rates, and this is probably the important part right here, my friends, as the housing market stalled because of high mortgage rates, there was less need for lumber and building supplies. And if you all recall, when building supplies went through the roof, maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, where a piece of OSB went from $10 to $15 a sheet to $60 a sheet. There's still a stack of OSB in my parents' storage unit building, really. I'm just waiting for somebody that wants to buy it. But building materials were just absolutely outrageous. And when you're looking at the economy, things don't generally happen in real time. It takes a while. And I'll refer you back to the interview I had with one of the Freedom Gold USA guys. Paul is his name, and Paul Cox is his name. And he was explaining that in the market, things take a while. So what you're seeing right now really is a result of what happened 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. And Wyoming things, and you'll be familiar with this. You might see a trend happening nationally, and then it takes a couple months, 2, 3, 4, 6 months before you start seeing that same thing here. Well, the economy is no different. When something happens immediately, gas prices spike, well, then you will see the reverberations of that happen in the larger market a little bit later. And this true value bankruptcy is just one of those things. But to the article, Home Depot and Lowe's have also struggled to bounce back from the consumer slowdown. Instead, discount retailers like Target and Walmart prevailed as cash strapped customers searched for cheaper deals. Since the new homeowners typically buy fresh furniture, beds, couches, tables, and chairs, homeware sales also slumped. Home furnishing retailers Big Lots and LL Flooring announced in September that they had filed for bankruptcy as their sales plummeted. Home furnishings retailers Do It Best is a member of the hardware and lumber wholesaler that sells building materials to independent stores. Maine, Indiana-based, ranked in nearly $4 billion in sales last year. The company said. Let's see here. Continuing on. That's about it. But really, for me, that's kind of a sad day, simply because I'm not a real big do-it-yourself type of guy. We are trying to Christine Salon up and running. It's going to be fabulous. I've been doing what I've been able to do down there, and we got most of it from a local store. Most of it came from Home Depot, but there have been several things that I bought at True Value, just so that we could get the work done. And a lot of people are like that. If you're working on a project on a Saturday and you think, oh crap, I need this tool, where do you run? Ace Hardware, or that's where I run. But really, a sad day when we're talking about the overall economy. So there's been a new story out, and I don't know that you've seen this or not. I first saw it yesterday, and it appears that Joe Biden is not the only plagiarist. In fact, it's his vice president also. Yeah, and it turns out that Kamala Harris has absolutely plagiarized parts of her book. And the first report, and this is kind of a funny one, kind of just to make light of everything, but from the Babylon Bee, Kamala Harris announces a new all-original book, The Art of the Deal, and I quote, hoping to round out her presidential campaign on a strong note, Vice President Kamala Harris announced the upcoming release of her all-new, completely original book titled The Art of the Deal, just in time for Election Day. The publication of the book, which the Harris Walls campaign said would revolutionize the business landscape, provide entrepreneurs with new insight into the process of negotiation and deal-making, features firsthand knowledge of the vice president's experience in the high-stakes world of New York real estate. The quote, I'm happy to publish my new book of entirely new and original material, said in the press release that accompanied the announcement of the book. Just like my previous book on criminal justice, this new book will offer never before seen information that hasn't ever been found in any other book. Even books that coincidentally have the same title. Many people know my history. Okay, blah, 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 blah. It's funny. And the Babylon Bee, it's amazing to me how many stories they've published in advance of world events that have actually become true. But this was in reaction to revelations that Kamala Harris plagiarized entire sections of her book on criminal justice. Let's see here. This one, I'm not sure where this is from, probably Breitbart News. Publisher in damage control after report detailing Kamala's alleged plagiarism, and I quote, hours after Christopher Rufo reported that Vice President Kamala Harris has allegedly plagiarized multiple sections of her 2009 book, Smart on Time. Rufo reported that the book's publisher had accidentally sent him an email showing that it was in damage control. Breaking: Kamala Harris's publisher, Chronicle Books, is in damage control mode. The company accidentally sent my team an internal communication indicating that VP Lauren Hoffman is requiring all inquiries about Harris's plagiarism go through the higher ups, Rufo posted on X. He included a screenshot of an email, which he said was sent to him by accident, that instructed employees to funnel any questions of plagiarism through the top brass. Several mainstream media outlets picked up on Rufo's story, but only to criticize him. And here's the title of a New York Times article, or excuse me, I think it was Politico. No, New York Times. Conservative activist seizes on passages from Harris's book. The New York Times headline read. The article went on to explain that plagiarism expert had determined that the obviously lifted passages were, quote, not serious. Quote, somebody hang this in the Louvre, Rufo said of the New York Times piece. The New York Times claims that I seized on Kamala Harris's serial plagiarism. It admits later in the story that it is, in fact, plagiarism, and then calls noticing that fact racist. Well, the this has developed into a larger story, and it's not as big as it ought to be. Let me take you back to 1987, 1988 with Joe Biden. In the 1987 Democrat primary debate, Biden sprinkled a guy named Neil Kinnock's phrases into his own speech and forgot to credit him. Yeah, forgot being in quotation marks. And the blunder may have cost him the presidency. So after the break, we're going to talk about political plagiarism or plagiarism by politicos. And we're going to see exactly where this should take the Biden campaign. Not that I'm or excuse me, not that I'm saying it will. What I'm saying is, it should. But plagiarism is one of those things that, in my opinion, it literally tells voters that you have no original ideas of your own, and that you're just going to steal from other people, which is what Democrats do. They steal from you. After the break.
You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better views, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network. With great voices like Joey Guerrero from Just One Road and for Bob Lecture, Steve from the Herald. And of course, my favorite, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming most listened to the program. So don't forget to check out the article section at the website, independentnetwork.us. It's loaded with comments, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any other program. But the easiest place is just go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden, and you can't remember if you have your opinion today, it probably can't help you with that. But I can tell you that Joe was a better president. And now, back to my program.
Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Wyoming's conservative voice. We're almost at 300,000 downloads on the podcast, my friends. It's probably going to happen. I'm going to say later on this week, probably next week. We'll have a big celebration on the podcast. And anyway, I'm super excited about it. And I just can't wait to remember. Well, welcome back to the final 10 minutes of the broadcast. Joe Biden is the serial plagiarist. In fact, it derailed his 1987 1980 run for the presidency. Now, this is from a guy named David Smith in Washington. And I quote, under 30 may have been puzzled when Kellyanne Conway, the outgoing White House counselor, recently accused Joe Biden of serial plagiarism and presented Neil Kinnock, a former leader in Britain's Labour Party, as Exhibit A. The reference harked back to 1987 and a blunder that ended Biden's first bid for the American presidency. In his closing remarks at the Democratic primary debate, he lifted passages from one of Kinnock's most moving speeches without attribution. The resulting plagiarism scandal sank Biden's campaign. A generation later, Biden is preparing for 3 presidential debates against Donald Trump and has the full support of Lord Kinnock, now a Labor peer who always regarded the incident as an innocent mistake. Joe's an honest guy, the 78-year-old said by phone from his home in North London. If Trump had done it, I would know that he was lying. Why is it that it means that Joe Biden isn't lying or wasn't lying at the time? Now, Kinnock, a gifted orator, made his speech to the Welsh Labour Party conference in May of 1987. It was kicking off a general election campaign against a conservative Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. Quote, why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? He asked. Why is my wife, the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to a university? Nor the passages that followed were in the original script. He recalls, quote, I was making a decent speech that I'd written overnight, and I knew I had the audience gripped. It was a speech about what freedom really means for the great majority of people. But I knew that I hadn't lit the touch paper. So I went off my written speech and made the bit about my own family and Glenn's family, and which was obviously entirely authentic. As usual, even though I wrote the speech myself, the bits were always the one that I hadn't written before. The rousing oratory featured a party background broadcast of Hugh Hudson. Now, Biden duly sprinkled phrases from the speech into his own remarks on the campaign trail and was always careful to credit Kinnock. However, in a debate with Michael Dukakis, Jesse Jackson, Al Gore, and others at the Iowa State Fair, he rushed through the Kinnock passage in a closing statement and forgot to name its source. Bilzer's biography, Joe, recounts, quote, nailed it, he thought. The crowd was silent, enthralled, and even in tears. Biden left the stage feeling pretty good about things. Only one problem. An aide leaned in and said, you forgot to credit Kinnock. Shit. In his hurry, he had failed to squeeze in the usual accreditation. Prior to this, he had never claimed it as his own and had never been proud. Now, it was. Well, when that hit the papers, it completely derailed Biden's campaign, and rightfully so. If you are plagiarizing, if you are a plagiarist, it literally means that you don't have any ideas of your own, that you have to steal from other people. Now, it's completely okay to use phrases by other people so long as you say, Thomas Jefferson once said, or Abraham Lincoln once said, or Neil Kinnock once said. Politicians, Democrat politicians, I don't really like to do that because they want to persuade you that those ideas are their own. They are the ones that originated those, and thus they come off sounding more brilliant than they actually are. When it comes to light, it ought to derail a presidential campaign. Now, Kamala Harris really doesn't have any original ideas of her own either. And so it's not too far into the box to think that Kamala Harris would absolutely steal stuff. When you're the dummy that says, let's see here, where is one of the good ones? Well, there's just this one. When you're saying stuff like that, well, then why not plagiarize something? at the risk of derailing a campaign and being found out to be a serial liar, I mean, it would be worth the risk because everybody already knows that you're an idiot. And that's exactly what's happening here. It is the height of dishonesty in lying to the public. And we saw this in Wyoming too. It's not just national politicians that plagiarize. It was Cyrus Western on the floor of the House when he plagiarized an inauguration speech from LBJ, the one that was just stomach churning and made you want to vomit in your mouth. And as soon as he said it, I turned to a friend of mine that was sitting in the gallery, and I said, "There's no way that Cyrus Western wrote that. No way." And you could tell when he gave that speech that he really wasn't all that confident in it. And when it finally hit that he had plagiarized, now, I'm not saying that news of his plagiarism derailed his campaign, but what I am saying is it didn't help. When news of that hit home, I mean, pretty much everybody laughed at him. But Democrat politicians, and of course, Cyrus Western, he's a registered Republican, but that doesn't mean that he's actually a conservative. No, not at all. It doesn't really mean that he's really a Republican. I mean, he votes with the Democrats. I think it was like 76% of the time. So anyway, Cyrus Western here at home, or LBJ, or Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris, none of them have original ideas. And if the electorate has any feelings about honesty, which they should. I mean, at this point, you would think that everybody knows that the Democrats are dishonest. At this point, everybody should know. So we've got about 4 minutes left in the broadcast, and I didn't quite get to a story that I wanted to talk about, but Trump did an interview with Glenn Beck in which he said which he explained who's actually running the country. And it's. I think all of us have probably guessed that it's not Joe Biden making the decisions, and Kamala Harris is just. Well, she's just as dumb as Joe Biden. I mean, really, when you compare her unburdened by what has been to this, there's really no difference. But you can't be those folks that are making the decisions. But here is what Trump said to Beck, and pick this up on tomorrow's podcast so we can go through it a little bit more fully. But here's just the what he told him. It's a nasty group of people. It's a nasty government. It's a mean government. They weaponize government, said Trump. It's interesting because the people are very smart. The people on top. These figureheads are cognitively lackluster. Trump said that the people who surround them are alternatively smart and they're vicious and they're fascist and everything else that you can be. It's a nasty group of people. And he said, quote, and listen to this, I think it's actually a committee of people. And they may not even know who the committee is. They may not even know themselves, Trump said. It's a siloed and stratified shadow government structure. It's a group of people that are in different levels of DC, and they surround a man that was the most capable person, and by the way, never was, but certainly not anymore, who repeatedly emphasized Harris's incompetence and hostility towards Christians, suggested that she might be an even more malleable figurehead to the committee, noting that she's worse than he is. And the difference is, she is a true believer. She was a believer for a long time, he told the nationally syndicated radio host. She was a Marxist for a long time, further left than Bernie. So what Trump is suggesting is the same thing that all of us intuitively know, that Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, frankly, they're not smart enough to affect a lot of the policies that this administration has put forward. And there is a group of people surrounding them that are telling them what decisions to make. Every single interview that Kamala Harris has done has been, at the very least, uninformative, and at the very worst, absolutely stupid. She's asked direct questions, and she can't even volley an answer. She always goes back to platitude-esque talking points that were written for her, and none of them really mean anything, which tells you that they don't really want her going off script because she's going to say something stupid, the yellow school bus, or the significance of the passage of time, or like I said, I can play you about 10 minutes worth of word salad coming from Kamala Harris. But it's clear that Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they really don't have the political acumen make all of these decisions. Well, anyway, we'll pick that story up tomorrow on the benefits. Now, remember, tomorrow it's 11 of the hour open lines, and we're going to try this whole call in thing, see if it'll work for Open Line Friday. I'm super excited. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.